Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. We are back for another WrestleMania for our ongoing WrestleMania series. And for this episode, we are doing WrestleMania 8. WrestleMania 8 took place on April 5th, 1992 at the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis, Indiana. The announced attendance for the WrestleMania was 62,167, and you could really feel the difference, comparatively speaking to last year, obviously being four times that of that announced attendance last year. Let there be a big old asterisk next to that attendance, though, because it is said that about a fourth of said attendance got in for free, so got a free ticket because Vince did not want the arena to look empty. So interesting bit there. The taglines for this WrestleMania were, yes, you heard that right, taglines, because there were two, because this WrestleMania was advertised as having two main events. So of course you need two taglines, right? So the taglines for this WrestleMania were "Friendship Torn Apart" and "The Macho Flair Affair." So kind of continuing off last year's theme of turning a new page in WWE, this one very much does the same. But this one was more so out of necessity. This WrestleMania took place during the then height of controversy that WWE had seen, including but not limited to sexual allegations and steroid abuse. So, despite all of that, WrestleMania turns in what I would say is one of, if not the best WrestleMania that we've watched so far. But more on that as we get into it. Let's go ahead and get started with each match, and we'll give it a rating and an overall rating as we always do. So, kicking off the very first match of the night, we have HBK, Shawn Michaels, debuting his singles gimmick here at WrestleMania, up against another guy sporting a bit of a new gimmick and the ever consistent, always present Tito Santana, coming as El Matador Tito Santana. So, KP, opening match wise, what'd you think of this one?
Yeah, we kickstarted this WrestleMania with a pretty damn good singles match between two people who, you'd expect to put on a pretty good showing, to be fair. I enjoyed this one. I think, it started off with a nice pace to it. I think Shawn Michaels and Tito Santana, they're both, very gifted, guys in the ring, and they got a lot to give, a lot to show. And it was really great to see, Shawn Michaels' very first WrestleMania singles appearance. Obviously, having seen him with as part of the Rockers recently in the previous ones, yeah, there's obviously a little bit of a different depth to him. And seeing Santana in a different gimmick as well, having something a little bit different to offer with last year's pretty horrid match for himself. Yeah, I think it was definitely a very good direction to move into this year. But yeah, talk about how the match went down. Basically, like I said, very technical match between both men. Both guys had moments of control throughout the contest, really, so that was that quite nice to see. So like the ways it sort of like shifted back and forth. Sensational Sherry, she would play interference a few times, assisting Shawn Michaels from the outside, being very vocal and very aggressive with the way that she would go about her business. Shawn Michaels spent a lot of time rolling to the ringside area in this match. I think maybe that's like just part of the dynamic here and the gimmick of Shawn basically just trying to sort of like get into the head of his opponent. He spent an awful long time rolling to the outside and just being out there, generally speaking. In the end, Tito attempts to go for like a scoop slam. Michaels is on the apron, and yeah, he tries to scoop slam up over the ropes and like into the ring. As he does so, Shawn Michaels sort of like shifts his weight down onto Tito, and sort of like imagine like a crossbody impact sort of type thing, landing onto the canvas, and then that'll be enough for Shawn Michaels to get the victory. Sort of came seemingly out of just nowhere, the win in this one, but it was a good match. It was solid 1-on-1. It was a nice pace contest, kicking things off. The crowd seemed pretty hot as well for it. And yeah, I think just comparatively speaking to those of the previous WrestleManias we've done, this is one of the better opening matches we've seen, which was very, very refreshing and quite nice. I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. I thought it was good. Yeah, just a great way to kick things off, basically.
Yeah, pretty much agree with you there. Definitely, if not one of the best kickoff matches for WrestleMania so far, and also definitely if not one of the best matches for Tito so far that we've seen. And as far as HBK, although his entrance song is not my favorite, definitely a lesser, worse version of the song we know now. But as far as HBK, you just see why WWE saw something in him, not only for his in-ring ability, which is obviously very, very good, but the man just oozes charisma. He just has that it factor. So with the actual match, yes, of course, high quality with the two guys in there. You nothing less than what you would expect. But alas, obviously, HBK getting the win here. He's headed off to bigger and better things. But to get yourself a quality match in the meantime, Tito is that guy to do just that. So I think even as it was either during or right after, or maybe both, they were saying that HBK has already announced his goal here, his target after this match is over, is to go after that Intercontinental title. So yeah, clearly bigger and better things on the horizon quickly for Shawn Michaels. I gave this one a 7 out of 10. Getting into the next match, which is the second match for The Undertaker, this time with Paul Bearer going up against Jake the Snake Roberts. KP, what did you make of Undertaker's second WrestleMania match?
Big improvement on the first match. I think this one just had a bit more time, and B, just they were allowed to sort of like just do a lot more work throughout the contest in this one. I think we saw a bit more of Undertaker, that we know pretty well in this match, whereas in the previous one we didn't really get to see an awful lot. But Jake the Snake, he didn't offer an enormous amount of stuff in the contest. Like in the early stages, he hit Undertaker with a fair few moves and strikes. But as the commentary team was saying, this guy is he doesn't feel pain. The Undertaker, he just doesn't go down when being hit. And it took a while for Jake the Snake to really show any signs of actual punishment towards the Undertaker. It gets to a point where, in the end, Jake actually hits not one but two of his DDTs. And normally, Jake the Snake hits a DDT, that's going to be it. He's going for the cover and he's winning the matchup. But in this case, he's absolutely spent. He's gone to the well to try and take the Undertaker down, and this was literally just his last chance, to get him down and just do it. But because he's so out of it, he eventually gets back up. But as he's doing so, the Undertaker gets up as well. During his classic sort of like raise up sort of stance that he does, and that allows Jake to hit a second DDT. But once again, he's absolutely spent. And eventually they go to ringside. What Jake does anyway, he goes to ringside to start attacking Paul Bearer, because he's obviously been very animated on the outside with the urn. And as he's sort of like throwing a couple of hands to Paul Bearer, well, what does Undertaker do? He rises up once again. He comes down in the aid of Paul Bearer. And he turns Jake the Snake around, picks him up, hits a tombstone power driver on the outside, and then just simply rolls Jake back into the ring and goes for his classic cover, which he would normally do after a power driver. That would be enough to get the victory over Jake Roberts. It was a good match. Like, I thought it was a bit slow to start with. It was it didn't quite go down in a quick fashion like the first matchup. But I mean, when you got two guys like this, you're not expecting quick, you're not expecting fast, but it was a little progressive to kick things off, and that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that as such. But yeah, it was a good match. I liked it, and it was good to see a bit more of Undertaker this time, comparatively speaking to that of last year. So I gave this one a 6.5 out of 10. I think just the quality was just generally pretty good for the majority, and I like the character work as well, just showing a bit more of the Undertaker, and that's the side obviously that we all love to see. What did you make of this one then, Nick?
Yeah, definitely allowed Taker to show more of his what we know now personality. Rising up the way only the dead man can, after receiving not one but two of those DDTs from the Jake the Snake Roberts, and a great guy to kind of show what Undertaker is capable of, and a great guy to help build Undertaker up. In his character, and the announcing team did a great job of that. And I completely forgot to mention it last WrestleMania, but Jesse the Body Ventura not there for this WrestleMania, and that reminded me of that because the snake skin boots of Jake the Snake Roberts, but this year being Bobby the Brain Heenan and once again Gorilla Monsoon, were really selling Undertaker, and I think that is a testament to why he was so successful. It's because they were selling him to be that you know dead man and otherworldly persona. So but yeah, another statement win from the Undertaker, and honestly a pretty impressive start. The crowd were pretty hot for Jake the Snake Roberts always, but also Undertaker, so I think that's a good sign as well this early in his run. Unfortunately, this would be Jake the Snake's last WrestleMania. And an interesting bit before this event, Jake had expressed getting out of the ring and taking Pat Patterson's job after his sudden resignation amid the controversies. Vince said no, hoping that he would be back shortly. But Jake then asked for his release entirely from the company, of course, which Vince also said no to. So, playing a game of chess is Jake Roberts before the match, before Jake runs out to WrestleMania for his match. He threatens Vince, if you don't give me my release, I'm leaving the building right now. So essentially, leaving and not appearing for his WrestleMania match. Of course, Vince said yes to that because he had no other option. And Jake the Snake Roberts would end up feuding with Sting that summer down in Atlanta. So interesting bit there. I give this match a 6.5 out of 10 as well. Getting into the next match, very, very on paper, one that I'm not sure I knew existed. This is Bret the Hitman Hart, him also going on his singles run here as well, going up against Roddy Piper for that Intercontinental Championship. KP, two, very historic and monumental guys in the ring here. What'd you think of this one?
Yeah, this was tremendous. This was a really, really great technical match to watch. I had a joyous time taking all of this in, to be fair. Yeah, just it was really, really back and forth. Both men, they were just able to just completely do whatever they wanted to. It was particularly petty in parts, which it sort of like encapsulated what the feud had been up until this point. And, both men looked to take advantage, during moments of the match whenever they could see possible. It had like a really nice feel to it. It was one of those matches that you can watch, you can enjoy, you can appreciate the technical aspect, but you can also sort of understand that this is a big fight feel for these two men. And obviously with the Intercontinental Championship on the line, that also adds a little bit to the spice as well. So yeah, never a bad thing in this one. But yeah, Roddy Piper, he looked great considering what he retired 4 years prior to this or something like that. And obviously now is back in again. He's been in bits here and there. Last year we saw him at WrestleMania. He was on a crutch. So yeah, it's been a very interesting path to get to this point for Roddy Piper. But being the IC champion, defending against Bret Hart, yeah, I mean I loved it. I thought it was great. Eventually in the match, it gets to a point where the referee gets knocked down after a little bit of an altercation. Piper, he attempts to take advantage because he goes to grab the bell, the ring bell that would normally be used at every match. And he goes to strike Bret Hart with the belt, but he actually sort of hesitates. He reconsiders. He ponders it for quite a while. He's just holding it. He's not sure whether to hit him or not with this bell. And after a few moments, probably good minute and a half maybe, of thinking it through, he throws the belt to ringside, says, actually, no, I'm not going to. I'm going to win this the proper way. And he just locks in a sleeper hold on Bret Hart. He's not in the sleeper for too long, maybe a little while. But Bret sort of manages to turn, the sleeper around sort of thing, and brings Roddy Piper into a corner. He used the corner to propel himself up and back, sort of sending both men down onto the canvas. But Bret Hart sort of flips over, and yeah, he's able to pin Roddy Piper there and then for the championship victory. It was a cool little way to end things here. Obviously, Roddy Piper, not doing what he probably should have done to get the victory. You could argue that if he had done it, it would have been game over. But, Bret Hart was already busted open prior to this. So, he'd obviously been through quite a lot, in his face. So, whacking him over the face with a bell after doing that, yeah, it would have been lights out for sure. But yeah, I bet he probably would have regretted not going for that. But either way, regardless, though, Bret Hart taking advantage and capitalizing when you might least expect him to do so. And yeah, it was a really, really good match here between both men. Like I say, the scales have shifted so often, and I think both men just showed really great character work, and the build just sort of, it came out in this one. You didn't really need to see too much of that build because you could understand it from the story they told in the ring, which is just, that's perfect. For the casual fan, somebody that's just watching this doesn't understand anything that's happened prior to this, or maybe us that do we know everything that took place in the build up into this one. I mean, I don't think we really needed to because it told the story itself in the matchup, so that was great. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Really, really liked it and enjoyed it, and yeah, just a solid match between both.
Yeah, I agree. And once again, yeah, so this was a great back and forth. Obviously, Bret Hart getting busted, yeah, nasty cut there, badly enough that you see that blood on the apron, littered all over the apron, and you see that for the rest of the evening. Um, which at the time bleeding was forbidden. So Bret and Piper sold and convinced everyone, including Vince, that this one was an accident. It was not. And I know what you're thinking. Isn't there another match on this card that also has a pretty nasty blade spot? More on that in a bit. But yeah, that spot where Roddy Piper grabs the bell and kind of his conscience gets the better of him and all that. And that was a great spot. And as you mentioned, it's telling a story within the match. It's always great to see, especially when you have two technically gifted guys in that of Bret Hart and Roddy Piper. And as you mentioned, yeah, it looked great for the amount of time it's been in the ring, or at least, that we think he has. I'm sure he was in there more so than we know, but regardless, yeah, Bret getting the win here in a kind of passing of the torch moment, if you will, with Roddy kind of congratulating him and putting that belt on Bret Hart. Yeah, great moment. One of the many great moments throughout the night. And yeah, I give this one an 8 out of 10. And just like that, we have a pretty quality WrestleMania so far. So interesting to see at this point in time, getting through Mania, if that could continue. Obviously, after WrestleMania 7, we were desperate to see something just a tad better. And so far, this WrestleMania does give it just that. Moving on to the next match, I would call this a bit of a dip in quality, but comparatively speaking to some of the matches we've seen through first seven, this was definitely not terrible, just not as good. But those first three matches were very quality. This match features a ton of personalities. In Hacksaw, Jim Duggan, if you need to get that out of your system when you get it on here, KP, please do. Sergeant Slaughter, Virgil, and the Big Boss Man going up against the Mountie, Repo Man. I was impressed that Mountie had survived a year, and Repo Man being repackaged, and the Nasty Boys with Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart making his presence felt here after a absolute menacing WrestleMania 7. KP, what did you make of this tag match?
I'd say this is probably I don't know, the match I enjoyed the least up until this point. There was nothing particularly bad about it, but there wasn't really anything particularly great about it either. It was just a bit of a mess at points, I think, especially towards the late stages of the contest. It was a fine match. It showcased 8 guys. It got a lot of people, to have like a little bit of a moment on the WrestleMania stage, which ultimately is is an important thing. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't really sort of like get too much from this one. It was quite slow for the most part. And like I said, it eventually led to that like messy sort of brawl at the very late stages where Virgil, he's being held by knobs, as Sags, the other nasty boy, is attempting to hit Virgil in the face with the mask that Virgil was actually wearing. Going down into the matchup here, ends up coming off during the brawl, and yeah, he goes to strike Virgil with it, but instead actually hits his own tag partner Knobs, and as Sags is sent to ringside by Hacksaw, Virgil goes for the cover on Knobs to get the victory. So yeah, it was yeah, I don't know. There isn't really an awful lot of good to say about it, but then there's not awful lot of bad to say about it either. It's just sort of like a standard 8-man tag match. It gets people on the card, and we see a little bit of everybody. So I guess really job done in that sense, because it did exactly that. But yeah, I don't know. I gave it a 5.5 out of 10. It was fine. It probably did what it needed to, and that's all I guess really I can sort of say about it.
You made us wait. You made us work for that. Oh, there from Hacksaw. That was very well done. Yeah, this was a bit of a. I would call this like a gimmick match in that it would be. I wonder if these guys are going to be around next year. A gimmick match because some of these gimmicks are just so bad. Repo Man being Smash, formerly known as Demolition. Repackaged there. The Nasty Boys. I was baffled that they won the tag titles last year. Sergeant Slaughter going from the main event scene to this match, and Virgil kind of just being very generic looking. Yeah, it's just a bunch of very interesting gimmicks. Not necessarily anything bad to say about the wrestlers themselves, but just gimmicks that definitely wouldn't work in today's WWE. I think that's fair to say. I gave this one a 5 out of 10. As you kind of mentioned, it was just kind of there. Definitely not one that I'm going to go back, rush back to and watch anytime soon. So let's quickly turn the page to the next match, which has the first main event of the night. Randy Macho Man Savage with Elizabeth going up against Ric Flair for that WWE Championship. Ric Flair is accompanied by Mr. Perfect. You may have a few questions here, such as why are there two main events? And why isn't the WWE title match ending WrestleMania? These are questions that may never be answered, and a bit more on that later. But KP, what'd you make of our first main event for WrestleMania 8?
Although it's not at the very end of the card, I treat this as the main event in my opinion, because this is by far the best match on the card for me personally. This was gold. This was just absolutely glorious to watch. Macho Man and Ric Flair, they put on a really, really superb matchup between both men. The pendulum, it just really went back and forth throughout. And I say that throughout a lot of these matches, but this one really encapsulated that probably more than most. Because there were literally parts of the match where it literally be, Macho Man Randy Savage taking control, then Ric Flair, and then back and forth and back and forth. And it just allowed both men to really sort of like fight back against one another and just to take turns in just controlling the tide. It was fantastic. They both showed battle scars in the end eventually from the end of this one. And yeah, I think this we've seen a few like high quality matches so far during the series. I think this is probably my favorite of the bunch so far. It had everything. It had storytelling. It had a massive title win. It had a pretty heated feud. It had outside interference. It had a technical display masterpiece. It had back and forth. It was gripping to watch. There's not really an end to what I can really say about this, because it just was amazing in pretty much every aspect. Talking about the match itself, as it went down, you got Mr. Perfect on the outside. He's sort of like getting involved here and there throughout the matchup as well, assisting Ric Flair. But eventually we get a figure four leg lock from Ric Flair. He's locking that in. Miss Elizabeth, she comes down to the ring and she basically is there for like a few minutes in like the late stages of the matchup, trying to help spur Savage back on. Savage gets out of the figure four eventually and is able to hit his elbow drop. Gets to a point then where Savage ends up winning by a roll up, because, and I'm pretty sure it was actually spoken about and discussed later on in the night as well. Savage actually held the tights when he went for the pinfall here, so that was quite interesting. Winning the title by a roll up, maybe that's the only slight thingy here, but it made for a shocking moment. It was out of seemingly nothing, and it just was a quick little thing to get that win over Ric Flair. Obviously, he was absolutely furious afterwards. He knew about the tights being pulled. I didn't see it when it first happened. Then obviously when they started speaking about it, I was like, oh, really? That did take place? I went back and had another quick look. And yeah, there actually is a little bit of a tight grab from Macho Man. So yeah, I mean, it was a very entertaining match. Like I say, technical display was fantastic. And yeah, we even had a little bit of stuff afterwards as well with Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect looking to attack Savage. Obviously taking out the frustrations. Elizabeth sort of protects him, tries to step in the way of Ric Flair. And Rick just literally latches onto Miss Elizabeth and just gives her a kiss. She then unleashes a barrage of slaps and just absolutely just goes hell leather on Ric Flair. Then we get security and Savage getting involved and stuff as well, and eventually Rick and Mr. Perfect are removed from the ring, and that allows Savage and Elizabeth to celebrate on Savage's second WWF title reign. So yeah, there was a whole lot to really discuss in this one. It was a really, really, really fun match as well, and it meant a lot. It's a big moment, big fight feel, and yeah, just a really, really brilliant contest for sure. I gave this one a 9 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. Like I said, just there have been a few matches so far in this WrestleMania series, and I think this is the my favorite one out of them all so far. But yeah, what did you make of this one, Nick? As good as me in your regards, or yeah, well, there was a lot to take in. So where's your head at with this?
Yeah, I would agree. This is definitely one of the best matches we've seen so far through our WrestleMania series. Um, just yeah, had a bit of everything. One thing that I found a bit odd was why the officials were so gung ho about getting Elizabeth back. Um, you know, because obviously Mr. Perfect was out there, was causing issues as well. So I was curious why Miss Elizabeth was being kind of tried to escort back. If that was kind of for her own safety, I think commentary kind of hit on that because Ric Flair had, was very much kind of harassing Elizabeth before this whole bit and continues to do so here. But I think to kick off Mania, Bobby the Brain Heenan was talking about that picture that apparently Ric Flair had of Miss Elizabeth that they were going to put on the jumbotron. And there's a segment earlier in the night where he's kind of looking at it, and Mr. Perfect and himself are looking at it and kind of oogling at it, if you will. So maybe that was kind of the reason, but still, I thought that was a bit different. But yeah, Ric Flair and Macho Man, you knew that you were going to have a decent match at the very, very least. I think, yeah, as the ending with the tight roll ups, not, ideal, but in this scenario, it does kind of play a part. Just felt like, what we had built up to with that pin was a bit anticlimactic. But the match itself was still obviously very technical, very good. Ric Flair blading here, a lot more obvious. He did not get off the hook as Bret did earlier in the night. Got a pretty big fine from Vince. Actually, almost fired because, and at this point in the night, Vince had just seen one, and so that probably sent his temper up a little higher than it probably should have. But that promo that Ric Flair delivers after the match, Savage is good as well. But the iconic, bloodied face and the hair just looking crazy, looking a bit like a Carrie scene from that movie. So yeah, great interviews post match. If you haven't checked those out, please do. But yeah, this was a great contest. Seeing Randy the Macho Man Savage get back that IC title was just a great moment, and typically his wins are associated with him. Yeah, Randy all of a sudden has one of, if not the most consistent, highest performances throughout WrestleMania 8 to this point. So yeah, I gave this one a 9 out of 10. I debated giving it a perfect rating. I was definitely considering it, but there were just a few bits that kind of I didn't love as much, but definitely still one of the best matches we've seen so far in WrestleMania series. Getting off to the next match, we have a debuting at Mania Tatanka going up against the model Rick Martel. Yeah, Bobby the Brain Heenan says some absolutely out of pocket things here. It almost distracts me from the match enough. But I think he may be worse than Ventura. Some of the things Ventura said were pretty out of pocket as well, but I think the Brain takes it just that notch above. But KP, in regards to the match, what do you think of this one?
Will you stop? That was basically all we heard for this match, wasn't it? And throughout the most of the night, to be fair, Gorilla Monsoon, I think I've never heard so much rage baiting from someone so much in such a short period of time. what Heenan produced throughout this WrestleMania show. He managed to get under the skill of Monsoon. I don't know how many times throughout the course of the night, but in this match, you could probably definitely agree that he was very out of pocket and out of line. In terms of the match itself, I think we sort of start seeing just a general sort of like decline in quality after that Macho Man match. But obviously, when you get a match like that, naturally you're going to have a little bit of a drop down afterwards as well. But we get Tatanka and Rick Martel. It's a pretty standard match. It wasn't bad, but it just wasn't great as well. A little bit back and forth, and it did flow kind of well, to be honest with you, as well. But it was pretty short. So, there's not a lot of time to work with here, and ultimately when you don't get too much time, it's hard to really say an awful lot, good and bad about it, I suppose, really. But Tatanka, in the end, he gets the win by hitting a crossbody after being Irish whipped by Martel, sort of like manages to avoid any contact after the rebound, and eventually does his own sort of thing, hitting that crossbody, which sort of just seemingly comes out of nowhere. The match just seemingly had like a nice little flow to it, and then, ultimately the crossbody is enough to get the victory. So, it did sort of like just come as a bit of a surprise about how just instantaneous it was from that particular point. But, I mean, like I said, there's not an awful lot you can really say about it. It was pretty standard, and it was fine for how long it did last. Let's say there was nothing overly wrong, but nothing overly great about it either. 5.5 out of 10 for me. They got to do a little bit, and that was, I guess, the main thing here from this one. And a debut for Tatanka at WrestleMania kicks off with a win, so not bad for him there.
That was a great Gorilla Monsoon impression, by the way. But and comparatively speaking, Heenan just feels like he was just kind of a notch up from Ventura. Ventura got annoying, especially in the tag matches, but didn't feel like he was trying to get on our nerves as much. But I really got used to that connection between him and Monsoon. Monsoon, as you mentioned, very offended, and rightfully so. Some of the things that Heenan was saying throughout the night were just crazy. Kind of make you double take there a bit. But yeah, for the match itself, this very much fits into that bucket that we referred to over the last few Manias, especially. They just kind of are there. They don't feel like a Mania-worthy match, but are decent enough and feature some decent in-ring action, and could have benefited from just a few more minutes to kind of establish the match a bit more. So I too gave this one a 5.5 out of 10. Just one of those matches kind of there, and not much more. Getting into the next match, we have a returning Earthquake, this time tagging with Typhoon as the Natural Disasters, going up against Ted DiBiase and IRS, also known as Money Inc., with Jimmy Hart, who have those World Tag Team titles. Just to get to WWE in the first place and then get slapped with a gimmick like IRS. That just has to be one of the worst feelings in the world. But in terms of tag matches, KP, what'd you think of this one? I thought Earthquake was much, much better here, as we've seen than we've seen in the last couple of Manias. And Ted DiBiase as well, I thought shined as well. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think that this is probably the highest rated match I've given to Earthquake so far. And obviously being, as part of the Natural Disasters here, he's got a little bit of backup, a little bit of company, so he's not doing it by himself. Ted DiBiase is extremely underrated, I think. Just generally speaking, whenever I see him in the ring, I really enjoy his work. I think it just, as a character, there aren't many people who sort of delve in to their character work as good as he does. He seems to have a really, really great knack of just absolutely just hitting it on the nail every single time. And I think with this match, it had a little bit of a strange sort of like feel to it. It was quite slow, quite progressive, and Ted DiBiase did his best to basically just wear down the Natural Disasters, bit by bit. It was mostly Ted. There were a little bit of IRS here and there, especially towards the late stages. But I think mostly it was Ted DiBiase just fighting and just bringing the Giants down, I guess you could really say. Natural Disasters, they dominated for a fair bit of this matchup, especially in the early stages, and it wasn't until that that comeback from Ted DiBiase that it looked like it was just all going to go the way of the Natural Disasters. Ultimately, in the end, this is where things get a little bit for me. I started to, just think, well, all of that for this, really. And what I'm referring to is Earthquake. He's looking for an Earthquake splash after doing this, pretty decent comeback to, take control of the contest. And as he's going to go for it, Jimmy Hart pulls IRS out of the ring to safety, which is pretty standard, fair enough. But Ted grabbed the titles, and they all just walk off. They get counted out. It ends via count out, and that's it. Like, it just felt extremely anticlimactic. It was a kind of a decent tag team match. It was building something, and it was kind of having a decent flow. But yeah, for them just to, the slightest bit of a comeback, and then, Earthquake looking to actually do something to try and get the victory here. For them just to quickly just end it there and then by just simply walking away. I mean, that's a terrible finish. Really, really poor. And thankfully, though, I mean, this is a positive I'm taking from this. When we've seen count-out victories in the past and, like, disqualification wins or whatever, normally the people who win the match, they actually, for some reason, celebrate, even when it's a title match. And they don't win the title because of it. They're seen in the ring looking pretty happy. Yeah, they've won. Great stuff. But this time, Earthquake and Typhoon, it pans to them. And, the referee raises their hands, but they look visibly very annoyed and they're frustrated because naturally, in this position, you would be. So at least Earthquake and, Typhoon, they actually did the proper thing and, sold their displeasure of the match. So yeah, I'm happy about that particular part at the end. But yeah, I gave it a 5.5 out of 10. I probably would have given it higher if it had a decent finish, but wow, that just left a really sour taste in my mouth, unfortunately. What did you make of this one then, Nick? How big did that sort of just walk off casually finish? How much did that impact your headspace here?
Yeah, if you listen to this channel at all, we do not like these crap finishes, and this was just that. The kind of the question for myself was the entering action enough to kind of keep it a high enough rating? And yeah, the Natural Disasters are a team that I felt like I could legitimately get behind. They proved they can go here. Kind of remind you of like a modern day Viking Raiders almost. Are much better than their size would tell you they are, and obviously it helps when you're opposing someone like Ted DiBiase, who is great at telling a story in the ring. I will agree. But yeah, that ending was like, at least the other countouts in the previous years was very much felt accidental for the most part. I'm not recalling a match where someone just walked away to receive a countout. I could be misremembering, but regardless, to just kind of have that, and then Jimmy Hart, I want to punch him in the face, and/or the booking team here, because it's just so annoying. Because we are building up a pretty good match, and then for Jimmy to be like, I think it was Jimmy. It was either Jimmy or Ted. I think it was Jimmy though. That kind of goes after the match. He goes, "Yeah, see, we're much smarter than them." I'm just like, "Oh, all right, well, yeah, you're smart for leaving the match, I guess. Whatever." I would not have been happy with that one. Just a blatant kind of decent match being built and just kind of throw it all away. Despite the terrible finish, I did give it a 6 out of 10 because I really liked what I saw in the ring before. So imagine what that could have been, with a good finish. But yeah, the Money Inc. holds the title for now, and what I think is a questionable booking decision. Let's move on to the next match, which has Owen Hart going up against the Skinner. I think Owen's Hart name in this one was the Rocket. I just see Owen Hart and I call him Owen Hart, but I forget all these horrible gimmicks he was tagged with. I'd love to know who he wronged to get some of these gimmicks, but yeah, hard to rate a match like this, and it feels like this is kind of like a tradition for WrestleMania. Before that main event, we must put on an absolute shit match, and this was just that, at least in my opinion. KP, what you got for this one?
Well, there isn't much to discuss here. It was probably all of a 2-minute match, maybe, if it was as long as that. Yeah, it was mostly dominated by Skinner, to be fair. He had a pretty strong match overall. Until Owen, he basically gets Irish whipped over the top rope, holds on to it, sort of like stays in the matchup. And yeah, he surprises Skinner from behind. He does go for a roll up, and as you can see on the bottom right corner there of the screen, that roll up there, that is the win in the matchup. It literally was as simple as that. It was a very quick contest, didn't really sort of do too much. And not to sound redundant, but when a match is very short, there's not a lot to discuss. So, yeah, it's very difficult to piece things out here. I mean, Skinner looked kind of dominant. I guess that's good for him. And Hart just capitalized on the one thing he could and got the win. So, what does that say about both men? Okay, we can leave that up for discussion, I suppose. I gave it a 2 out of 10. It just, what more can really be said? It was just too quick. So yeah, that's all I got.
When a match hovers around a minute, this is, I think, the first WrestleMania that we've had a match that didn't have a match under a minute. This one wasn't much more. I think it was just like a minute and 11 seconds. Very, very short. With a match that short, it's hard to give it an actual rating. I typically just slap a 2 on there, much like you did. And that's exactly what I did here. Again, I just want to know what Owen Hart did to get some of these gimmicks. But let's get into the main event. Controversial to say the least. We have Hulk Hogan going up against Psycho Sid. Sid Vicious for the second main event, and I think this was the part of, we see a bit earlier. It's WBF, World Bodybuilding Foundation. I think this was part of that big push before we got kind of hit with those steroid allegations. I think that pretty much put a hold to that whole thing. But Sid Justice does say before the match that this will be Hulk Hogan's last match. So setting up some big statement there. And you recall the questions I posed earlier, why there were two main events, and why isn't WrestleMania ending with that WWE championship? So we'll try to get through a few of those here and see if we can make sense of why the second main event wasn't the first, or why the first main event wasn't the second. KP, yet again, a Hulk Hogan main event. What did you make of this one? And comparatively speaking, where does it go throughout the other 7 WrestleManias for you?
Yeah, this was just wrong. This shouldn't have been the main event. Like, we can discuss Macho Man Randy Savage, Ric Flair, and then this match all day long, and I don't think there's a real argument, except this one has Hulk Hogan in it. That is probably the reason why they just gave this the main event. Hogan has to get his poses in, he has to celebrate, he has to, get in with the fans at the end of the show. That's probably basically all you can really say as to why this was the main event, because as a match, it was a classic Hulk Hogan match, and that's not a good thing. That's a very basic standard thing. Because we mentioned last year against Sergeant Slaughter, it was a very simple 101 wrestling, babyface heel matchup. This wasn't quite, the same. It was similar, but it wasn't exactly the same. But it was very sort of on the same wavelength. Sid dominates for probably a good 80-85% of this match. It seemingly was like that anyway, as far as I remember. And it gets to a point where classically Hulk Hogan hulks up towards the end. But this time, he gets knocked back down. He gets knocked down on the first time. So Sid, one step ahead of the game, changing things a little bit. Is not letting Hulk Hogan hulk up immediately. It's the second time he hulks up, and that's when he goes through the motions, and that's when he wins. And he goes for a leg drop. To be fair, Sid does kick out. Harvey Whippleman, he interferes, and then that causes disqualification. I'm not entirely sure where, the disqualification lied, because as far as we could tell, Harvey sort of like comes up from the near side, the hard camera, and he gets onto the apron, and the referee seemingly just like sees what's happening and calls for the disqualification straight away. Whether there's actually contact between Harvey and Hogan, I couldn't tell when I was watching it. But yeah, it seemingly just seemed as like, he got up onto the apron and that was it. The interference, it was there. And the DQ just straight up happened. So maybe you can shed a bit more light on that in a minute, Nick. Perhaps maybe you saw a different angle or whatever. I didn't see anything else. But it was very difficult to actually know what happened, to actually initiate the DQ. But once the match had ended and, that all sort of like death had settled, Sid and Harvey are attacking Hogan post-match. And then we get the return that I think a lot of people had wanted and sort of hoped for throughout the night, because I saw on signs throughout different matches, bring back Ultimate Warrior. And they did. for the for the end of the show. They brought out Warrior. He came down to help out Hulk Hogan, and he helped fend off Harvey and Sid Vicious. So yeah, it's justice. So it was it was a good it was a good way of bringing Ultimate Warrior in. I'll gladly say that. It was a good return for him. So maybe you could argue that that was the reason why this was on the main event as well. So you got like two possible reasons there. One being because Hulk Hogan's in the match. One because it's Ultimate Warrior coming back. But yeah, they sort of celebrate together to end the show, and that's WrestleMania done in a nutshell, basically. But yeah, I don't know. In terms of the match itself, poor finish, a little bit confusing as well. Maybe you can shed some light. Yeah, just a classic Hulk Hogan contest, which for me doesn't really do much. I've, voiced my displeasures on Hogan matches in the past. This one was no different from that, really, for me personally. And with a bad finish as well. Yeah, a little worse as well. I gave it a 5 out of 10. Didn't do anything for me. The return was kind of cool, but that's pretty much it. What did you make of this one, Nick? How was it in terms of a main event for yourself?
Well, I'm sure you can already tell where I'm going with this based on the questions I posed to set up the match. But even if this was let's pretend this match had a clean finish with a typical hulking up and Hulk shenanigans, if you will. Even with the Ultimate Warrior return, I don't think this one holds a candle to the first main event and that of Savage and Flair. That's just my opinion. You don't have to agree with it, but that is mine. This was exactly the same match we've seen for the better part of the first 7 WrestleManias with Hulk Hogan. It just doesn't bring anything new. And Sid Vicious, he's not going to bring anything super exciting to the ring. Actually ends up being one of his biggest issues. Obviously he has the look, but was lacking other things. But yeah, this just wasn't a good match. There's really no way to get around that. I think they were banking on Ultimate Warrior kind of making us forget about all that, but for me, it didn't. I just made me more angry because I wanted to see that first main event be the only one. Just because Hulk Hogan's wrestling doesn't mean it has to be in the main event. Something we see similar days with other superstars. But regardless, the finish was, I believe, an audible because of the DQ finish by Whippleman, because Papa Shango was late running in. I don't know whose fault that actually was, but Papa Shango was supposed to come in to cause the DQ, but because he wasn't, Sid had to kick out of that leg drop. So that was the audible there. Was not supposed to be kicked out to kind of hold Hulk Hogan's finisher strong, but alas, that's what we got instead. So just a bit of a mess all over the place, a flaming pile, if you will. And yeah, I'm gonna hate on it because the first main event should have been the main event. But yeah, with that. Yeah, it was a mess. I think that's fair to say. But lots and lots of departing superstars here for this WrestleMania 8. But I think overall, they definitely didn't quite land the finish as smooth as they should have. But lots of matches kind of before that started were much, much better. So that is a WrestleMania 8 recap in every single match. KP. Let's hear an overall from you and kind of your best moments of the night, and of course that overall rating for WrestleMania 8.
Yeah, watching these back has been, quite an interesting experience so far because it's been very much a classic. You get a couple of good matches, or maybe like one standout and a couple of decent ones, and then you get a lot that are just a bit average and meh. This WrestleMania felt like it took a step up from that direction, not like a massive leap, but it was noticeable. It was enough to sort of think, oh, hold on a minute. We got a little bit more to go here. For first and foremost, 9 matches compared to what, 13, 14, 15, 16, however many across the ones that we've watched. Ultimately you think, okay, well, they're going to get more time for each match, which is good. And we'll probably see a lot more, and the quality would just generally be a bit better. And for the most part, that was the case. I think we started off the show very, very well. Shawn Michaels and Tito, Undertaker, Jake, Bret and Rowdy, then Macho Man and Ric Flair. I think those matches, standout ones throughout the course of the night. A little bit, dropping here and there afterwards and stuff and in between, but Just generally speaking, enjoy this one a lot more than I had any of the others prior to this one. So up until this point, WrestleMania 8 is my favorite one in the series. I gave this a 6 out of 10 overall. That's an average of all of my scores put together, like I always do. And yeah, I think that's fair. It stands up, on its own as the outright, best of the bunch so far. And that's exactly what it is. So yeah, just was really good to see some familiar faces. Obviously, I'm not saying like, I can't enjoy the older wrestlers, but in terms of just generally, just speaking here, I think bringing the sort of like the slightly newer ones in, it is seemingly bringing some more quality with it as well. And maybe that's a coincidence, maybe it's not, but I mean, hey, that's just what I'm sort of linking together here. But yeah, I really like this one. I thought it was definitely the best one so far, and yeah, I had a good time watching it. What did you make of this one, Nick? Where does it stand compared to the previous ones that we've seen? And yeah, what about that? that main event discussion. We could talk about that all day, but it definitely should have gone to Macho Man and Ric Flair, right?
So yeah, completely agree, and I won't harp on that too much more. But yeah, it should have. And up until the last 2-3 matches, I think if you were to stop the event at that Ric Flair Savage match, you're talking one of the best or the best WrestleMania we've seen so far by a landslide. But those last kind of few matches dropped it down. And I still gave the overall Mania a 6, which is still the best. By a good margin. Um, but yeah, just thinking what could have been, I think my rating up into the first main event was like above a 7. So you're talking, crazy difference between the highest before and this one. But alas, they decided those last couple matches were needed and necessary for this WrestleMania. But as you kind of alluded to, this WrestleMania did something that the other ones very much could have benefited from, and that is to give us quality over quantity, which I think is a great idea and something I hope that they kind of implement going forward. Or if they don't have enough quality matches to give us, obviously, I'm all for quantity if they can make it quality as well, though. Yeah, so like I said previously, for WrestleMania 7, WrestleMania 8 kind of continues that same trend, which is kind of turning the page, moving on to new talent. Because, within 6 months of this WrestleMania, WWE no longer has Jake the Snake, Roddy Piper, Sid Justice, Hawk and Animal, Ultimate Warrior, British Bulldog, and Hulk Hogan are all gone from WWE. So, comparatively speaking, WrestleMania 6 is going to look vastly different from WrestleMania 9 because the likes of all of those men leaving. So it should look very, very different for WrestleMania 9, and we'll get to see that here very shortly, as obviously we'll be watching that one next. And yeah, overall, I think this was the best WrestleMania. The matches you already mentioned being the highlight of them, basically up into the first Ric Flair Savage match. A very, very good WrestleMania, and just couldn't quite stick the landing, but still, even with that, it still comes out better than the previous 7. So yeah, with that, that's WrestleMania 8 all done here, and definitely feels like we're heading in the right direction. And I'm very curious to see what what WrestleMania 9's card looked like, because of all the new faces. So it's who will take that main event spot. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah. This is WrestleMania 8, and this has been the push with Nick and KP. If you agree with any of our ratings or disagree, please let us know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, as that helps us out tremendously. We will be back shortly with that WrestleMania 9 recap. But until next time, we'll see you then. Take care.